Hi there, my name is Rafael Roncato. I'm a Brazilian photographer, editor, and visual artist living between the Netherlands and Brazil. I'm here today to share a bit more about my latest book, Tropical Trauma Misery Tour, winner of the Dummy Award 2023, Lovely House Award 2023 in Brazil, and also special mention at the Hong Kong Photo Book Festival Award in 2023 as well. I'm pretty happy to share with all of you more in depth because, well, it is basically a very fresh release. It was just released in Arles and it's getting out of there right now. And I really hope you can enjoy this. No. So, in the end, what is Tropical Trauma Misery Tour all about? It is a visual journey about network propaganda for sure, fake news, a little bit of conspiracy theory, of course, but all linked to the idea of staged politics and how far right wingers and new fascism is basically misleading us and they're trying to manipulate us to reach to the power of the state, in which country we can see around the world. So in that case, in Tropical Trauma, I try to focus in a very specific scenario, which was the farce and the mini opportunism of the far right wing Brazilian president Bolsonaro. So I look how he used his social media to manipulate people, manipulate his supporters, and also the general case in Brazil. I look how he used his methods and tactics to around the stabbing event that happened in his rally campaign to be in control of his self-presentation and the narrative in general. And it's more about the media campaign he thrives afterwards and not only trying to focus in the reality of the facts, for example. I've tried the most to connect the story, the topic, with the object itself. The design was done by Matteo Zacioli, a friend of mine, also a very experienced designer. And we discuss a lot on how this book should have this feeling of a pulp novel, a pulp fiction, a very small size, very pocket feeling, pocket size as well. Some glossy paper. You can see that it's very reflective. Also inside, very reflective. And the idea was to mimic more about this feeling of a cheap novel or even the screen of a cell phone. Because we are all mediated by cell phones, by our phones, and the phones, in a way, they became the stage for those politicians to try to manipulate us or, for digital propaganda in general. It's also referencing The Medium is the Message by Marshall McLuhan, which is completely linked to the case. But then, not only discussing about the book itself, the content, the design, as I said, mimics a lot with what I was doing at that time related to communication. So there's plenty of text, and the reason of having text is because we're dealing with extreme right wingers and we're dealing with fascism, and they appropriate, they take whatever is being said and they try to change it. And considering the text, I thought about not having a platform for them or trying to get out of context and also feel as I'm supporting them. So in that case, the book itself is a reenactment with what happened in Brazil, in the Bolsonaro's case, reenacting his stabbing event, also with pictures that I have since 2017, when I used to work in media as a photojournalist, as a documentary photographer. And I was trying to bring all the sensations, the ideas that we had at that time. But not only that, I was trying to also represent how is being Brazilian in that scenario, a scenario of chaos, a scenario of digital populism, of violence and progressive values. So in a way, I'm always presenting like a theatrical version of this reenactment. This stage in itself, this kind of a picture of a stage with the Brazilian flag in the center. Also kind of WhatsApp messages exchanged with other people when Bolsonaro was stabbed, saying that probably he would use this in his own favor. And in that case, I go through not only the simple story, but also how these get chaotic through every time you revisit. So in that case, to reenact this story, I decided to hire a Dutch actor to represent, mimic Bolsonaro, and also kind of becoming Bolsonaro, and blending with those studio pictures that I was producing in the last 2 years during my master's. And the studio pictures are basically trying to translate the feeling of being Brazilian at that time, trying to understand and cope with that reality in between some other juxtapositions, appropriations of official images of the government, or even pictures that I took throughout those years, trying to unravel for myself what's happening in this fascist Brazil. And the whole idea was to appropriate also the colors of Brazilian flag. The red, because Bolsonaro was extremely against communism, despite we don't have it in Brazil. But the whole intention was to bring an experience, always playing with the actor, playing between reality and reenactment. In that case, it is the myth. The myth is how Bolsonaro calls himself, and also how his supporters calls Bolsonaro. And there's a whole chapter just discussing and showcasing the idea of this megalomaniac oppressor in a crazy ego dance, like very violent, sometimes even against himself. So it's a whole chapter just discussing the idea of the myth. And you can see like the book's very colorful. They represent the Brazilian flag, they represent the gold, the green screen, also the red as the blood, as the knife. And the whole intention here is always playing between what is real, what is fake, what is just a representation, what's actually happening. And in this play, in the end, we never know what's actually true or not. Even the knife, sometimes it's a real knife, sometimes it's a fake knife. But in the end, it comes for us to ponder what is happening. Is everything a play? It's everything in performance for those politicians. So in those chapters, I tried to go deeper in those topics here. The fake knife is the first phase of the work. The myth, the second phase. Fake news and fake president. It's quite of a way to introduce each element, to dismantle it and decode it, and try to find ways, visual ways, to play with it, with somehow a dark humor around, but always bringing the experience. So this, for example, this is a very important picture for me in this work. This represents the printing schematics in a printing house on how to print the power section of a newspaper in Brazil. And the power section is basically for businesses and political scenario. So everything is kind of in a studio inside the screen, sort of a play. This is from a flat earth convention that I went through. So the studio is a big thing. The green of the green screen is almost like character in itself. It's where we project. It's where the illusions come from and through. And how Bolsonaro can also play, reenact, or act in that case. Try to find ways to manipulate us. In this book, I'm basically trying to overwhelm the reader with this amount of images, with different points of view in the text. Sometimes you are Bolsonaro itself, the actor. Sometimes you are an outsider narrator explaining what's happening. And sometimes you're just stuck in the middle of the work. So it's all a game of hide and seek, but it's also a very crude in your face heaviness of images. They're very colorful, they're very charged. So it is a long visual experience, around 350 pages. There's quite an amount of text. And for example, I also enjoy making some repetitions, writing over on the top of those images. And the whole idea was to try to bring the experience that we have nowadays with memes, the way we communicate in internet, social media, how we share news. So it's a book that you can read in one go as you want and be overwhelmed. As much you can read in parts through and stopping in those chapters. But it is a work and is also a play of repetitions, in which I can go a bit faster here. By going through the end of the book, you're also experiencing more text, more about the experience of the actor, which then I'm correlating the actor with the original actor, like political actor. And things get more complicated, more appropriation. So also the official channels of the government are pretty much an incredible archive in those years. And it is really a mix that I wanted to bring between what is real, what is actually the Dutch actor representing Bolsonaro, until the end that we kind of get in this crazy moment that Bolsonaro is just escaping in a jet ski and cut. So by the end of the book, I also added a contextualization text for the sake of the whole explanation, the whole documentation of what happened and how I did the book as well. But it's a book that comes from a lot of intention of trying to make sure this story never happens again. Digital populism and network propaganda are very dangerous topics we can see nowadays in our post-truth era. And yeah, it is a book that it's here for opening discussions, for us to understand that this is not only related to Brazil, but is related to any place in the world. And fascism, extreme far right-wing ideas are getting into places. And we have to fight back. Thank you for listening and being here. I'm really happy to share tropical trauma with all of you, and see you on the road.